To solve this data sufficiency question, we'll consider each statement separately first and then together if needed. Before we dive into the statements, let's go ahead and define some variables so that we can use them to interpret our word problem. First, let's go ahead and let's call x. Let's let that be the number of miles that the car traveled, or car travels, on city streets. And let's call y the number of miles that the car travels on the highway. So number of miles, we'll just tag that down because it represents all of the same stuff, except on the highway. So x is the number of miles traveled on city streets, and y would be number of miles traveled on the highway. We know that the car travels 18 miles per gallon of gas on city streets and 30 miles per gallon of gas on the highway. And that means we also know that x is less than y, interpreting the question. We need to determine the value of y. So to answer the question, we're essentially looking for whether we have enough information to determine the actual value of y. Now, since we know what we're after and we have variables to interpret our question, let's go ahead and dive into the statements. First, let's deal with statement 1. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit so that we have some room. We'll keep statement 1 up there. So statement 1 tells us that we drive a total of 26 miles to work. So this essentially tells us that the sum of x and y is equal to 26. Now, if this is the only information that we know, along with what we have up here, there's no way that we would be able to determine what y is exactly, because if x is, say, 10, then y is 16, and we can find a value. But say x is 8, then we can plug that in and y would be 18. All of the conditions hold and all the statements hold, but these obviously are not the same. So our value of y is really dependent on x here, and we don't know the value of x. So this statement alone is not sufficient. And if we scroll up, if statement 1 alone is not sufficient, we can eliminate several answer choices. We can eliminate answer choice A as well as D. Now we're still left with B, C, or E, so that means that we have to consider statement 2 alone and see what information we can get from that. So considering statement 2, if we interpret this, the car that Damaris uses or drives uses 1 gallon of gas to get to work. So this essentially means that the statement we can interpret as an equation. We have that x over 18 for the number of gallons or miles we can drive per gallon, plus y over 30 will equal 1. Now we actually run into a similar issue that we did with statement 1 here. Our value of y is going to be dependent on x, and we can't actually find a finite value for it, or one actual value for it. So suppose if x is equal to 3, we could plug into this equation, we would get y equal to 25. But suppose x is equal to 6, then if we plug into our equation, we would get y is equal to 20. So these are not the same, we're not getting the same y value for any x that we choose, and since we don't know what x is, this statement alone is not going to be sufficient for us. So we can go ahead and we can eliminate answer choice B, since statement 2 alone is not sufficient. That still leaves us with C and D as answer choices. So that means that we'll have to combine the two statements and see if together they're efficient. So let's scroll down a tad bit. We'll keep our statement 1 and 2 there. Our 1 and 2 together essentially gives us these two equations. We have x plus y equals 26, and we have that x over 18 plus y over 30 is equal to 1. This is a system of two variables with two unique equations. This means that a solution exists and we could solve this. We don't need to solve it since we actually don't need the value of y to answer the question. We just need to know that we can actually find a value for y. So two unique systems, they represent, each represents a line. They're not parallel or anything like that because they are unique equations. So that means that they intersect, so there is an xy point where they cross, meaning that we would have an x value and we would also have a y value to be able to answer this question. So the statements together are actually sufficient. We would be able to solve that system. So scrolling up, we can eliminate answer choice E, because together the statements are sufficient. So our final answer choice would be choice C.